not the jealous type, but if I can't have him, you can't either!
Here is the breach. With each cycle, more seeps into her.
Who are you?
Kill her. Now.
You do it. I'm not your puppet.
That is as close as we get to actually speaking to Major Rusalka. And given the context provided in this scene during the Hex quest, I don't even think that's her. Hey all, Siege here, and today I believe it's finally time to ask the question, what happened to Major Rusalka? The last we saw of her, she had presumably regained just the smallest bit of herself after crashing her cycle into the armored convoy, lurching forward to a still heavily injured Albertine Trotty. But is the nature of her disappearance maybe more important than her disappearance itself? And is this something we should be keeping a close eye on in the future, especially regarding how it would appear she was, or potentially is, still being held? While visually stunning in many ways, how exactly she came to be involved in the quest is still a bit of a mystery. Based upon the original aspects that were teased at TennoCon 2024,
A slug dares to show its face at night. Didn't the bastard doctor warn you? I've an order. Kill on sight. Pity. We could have been allies. My Scoldra, put that thing down!
the Rusalka we actually get to engage with is not only far different, but clearly not herself.
The doctor's dashing patient zero in the flesh. Shame. But my Scoldra have their orders. Kill on sight. Pity. We could have been allies, kiddo. My Scoldra, put that thing down!
And I can't say for certain if this was done to just keep the spoils of what would turn out to be a direct conflict with the Indifference intact before it launched, or if this alternate dialogue is part of an ending we have yet to receive. 1999 seems far from resolved in any tangible manner. I can't for certain say yet, but her adoptive parents, Velimir and Minerva, a Frost and Saren protoframe respectively, are supposedly already in the process of themselves trying to figure out what happened to their daughter and pursue whatever force was involved in her situation. I wonder, how will they feel when they learn the truth? Because within the kinematic instant messenger, we are given a deeper look into the current state of Rusalka through the very unique gifts of our own Eleanor. Her extraordinary power of telepathy allows her to know things about others that sometimes she'd rather not discuss, with the information within the minds of most essentially at her beck and call, should they consent or not, something that does cause her a fair bit of distress. However, at some point, her curiosity gets the better of her and she decides to engage the Drifter in a discussion about the Void. the incredible abilities it's given the Tenno, making them in many ways kind of god in their own right, as well as how it interacts with the Warframes and by extension the protoframes as well. Within these very interesting discussion pieces, concepts are challenged in many ways. The Heart of Deimos, for instance, and how if the heart functioned to bathe the origin system in void energy for mass utilization, that it somehow made its way here in 1999, years before its supposed discovery. After all, it has to be powering the protoframes in some way, shape, or form, one would assume. They also discussed the method by which the void transformed the Tenno's parents into nightmarish ghouls. Eleanor posits the very real consideration that the creation of an enemy for the Tenno and their specific gifts to be required in such an uncharacteristic way screams to the existence of some form of intelligent design, to which the Drifter is forced to reveal something I'm certain he hoped he wouldn't have to, at least in any real detail, and that is the indifference itself, along with its nefarious role in everything that has already occurred, and will most assuredly influence what invariably will come to pass, while revealing perhaps the most inconvenient truth of it all. Eleanor questions if there is a difference between the void and the man in the wall, to which he can only offer a hope that isn't the case. Because if it is, what exactly does that mean for the origin system? The idea that essentially an entire galaxy is being caustically pumped full of the presence of what very much seems like a demiurge of sorts, one that has come to acknowledge and, dare I say, appreciate awareness, is a scary one. In fact, another aspect of the dialogue with Eleanor allows us a glimpse into, first, a kind of veiled description of the void entity, at least as a reference. She begins this passage wondering if there is, for lack of a better way to say it, the existence of God, or a god if nothing else. She describes to the Drifter a very deep desire to connect with something outside of the human condition, something that can't necessarily be quantified in the conventional sense. While this dialogue can be lighthearted and even humorous at times,
I see dead people.
It takes a kind of dark turn when she speaks of communing with it. This desire to see what's behind the veil, what pulls the strings in the greater narrative under her terms, leads her into a kind of depiction of what she thinks of in said terms, as well as a kind of unfortunate foreshadowing. I'm going to include all of the dialogue here, as I believe it to be very relevant to the point at hand. Now, at first, Eleanor asks, are we alone, or did we finally contact something else? And the Drifter has a few different options he can go with in answering the question. The first is, you mean alien life? Not yet, but maybe one day. And she replies, well, shit. I was really hoping there'd be something out there we could talk to. Something with a truly outside perspective on our species. Talk to and other things, of course. And the Drifter asks, wait, just what sort of interaction did you have in mind? She says, some kind of communion, I suppose. Not necessarily anything physical. I just want to touch minds with something that not only isn't human, it isn't even terrestrial. I tried to touch minds with one of Letty's rats once, just to see what would happen. Obviously curious, the Drifter asks how that went, and she says it was a dreadful 3 seconds for her. Poor little thing. I'd failed to allow for what touching my mind would seem like to him, you see. Imagine a child lost in an infinite department store, screaming for its mother at the top of its lungs over and over. Everything was enormous and incomprehensible and had noises and shapes instead of smells. It's interesting that this description may actually offer us some insight into the moments just after the cavia were too presented with the curse of awareness.
Stop him! Stop him! Anyone! He's lost his mind! I can't! Help by the void! He's killed me!
Stop! Stop!
I'm leaking! I'm leaking!
You're fine. What in blazes?
What the hell do you care? You put us in that bill.
You watched as she...
I saved your lives! Do you really think Albrecht thought to freeze you? To preserve you? That was me! In the hope that we might find a cure
For void exposure.
Then that means...
The clock's still ticking. We're gonna die.
I'm working on it.
I don't care. I want the fish.
What?
He did it! He killed her! He killed Min!
What? I just told you that you're going to... Hold on a minute. The specimen... Min was lost to the void.
Vented to the void! By him!
Why would...
To save himself! Or so the coward thought! Tell them! Tell them what you did! The void had penetrated the bell. It was in there with us. Before it started talking, though, it made us smart enough to understand it. And that's when Fibonacci here lost his shit. Panicked. Tried to get it out by blowing the seal. Min was closest when it popped.
After the monitors failed, Albrecht wondered how you all came to be exposed to that degree. Fibonacci?
His name isn't Fibonacci. Of the four of us, he's the only one without a name. Aren't you, mate? Weren't even part of the group. Didn't even get a label. A late addition is all he was. An afterthought. A fish. Why name something too stupid to hold a memory for longer than 15 seconds?
I want to hear what...
He's killed me! You killed us! All of us!
Papa.
Forever kissing the fist that beats you. Papa? Papa is a stinking liar. Min and I were the last Surfalites. But Albrecht didn't see our species as having worth. We were just one more component in one more experiment. And Papa didn't think much of the results. So, tag for disposal. That was us. Both of us were. Tag for. But I won't let her go on with that. I gave her something better. She's Min. We were never meant to be here. We only ever had each other. And now, not even that. Papa? Papa? Spineless, void-damned Albrecht. I want to find him as bad as you do. And you'll know when I do. Because his head's going right in your stinking tank.
I never meant to. Lloyd. You can't imagine what it was like. To suddenly exist is horror enough, but to suddenly exist, to comprehend so much, only to be faced with extinction. I'm sorry.
What?
The sheer volume of sensory overload could not be overstated, and typically in these situations, fear is the accompanying emotion, and might even allow for a level of understanding as to what occurred with Fibonacci, Tagfer, and his lost mate Min. However, it's the other answer the Drifter can offer that, in my opinion, shows a glimpse of what we might really be up against. The question of, are we alone, is met with an entirely different explanation, at least from the Drifter's perspective. He answers, the indifference is the closest we've come, unfortunately. And Eleanor at this point is still unclear as to what that means. She's seen this thing from the mind of the Drifter, making her feel, well, very much like the rats she was describing earlier, desiring to run and curl up somewhere far away with very thick walls. And the Drifter admits that even he doesn't know what it is completely. There is a third answer the Drifter gives, specifically that we're alone. Nothing but humans and human-created things. But I can't help but think this is him merely attempting to placate her already established fears. After all, he doesn't think about any of this stuff. He knows. He may not know what the indifference is, but he clearly knows that it exists, and further, that it's hungry.
It is hungry, Tenno. And I am a distraction.
But within this section of the dialogue, he also drops a very substantial piece of information. He says, if I tell you it's what was possessing Major Rusalka, does that help? And she exclaims, oh no, oh shit. That thing? That's the same as your indifference? I touched it. I've touched that thing at the very edge of my mind, and I locked the memory away. I don't even remember when it happened. Rusalka was giving one of her speeches on the tannoy, and I thought, I've never probed her before. I wonder what's in there. Probably all leather and needles. So I reached out and... Shit. I can't talk about this yet. I'm sorry. And while she is unwilling to go any deeper into discussion at that moment, she brings up a few very valid points after the fact. She and the Drifter begin to delve into the nature of an afterlife. And in ways, she reveals her own innate fear of the unknown, especially now that she can pretty much confirm everything she had believed about the topic has unabashedly changed forever. And it's here where Eleanor brings up a point I've personally postulated many times myself regarding anyone the Void has interacted with. She says, how do we know it's the same person, the same point of view? What if it's just, I don't know, a Void clone or something? Could that happen? The Void taking the ideal person, then giving form to it. And that form then thinks it's the same person as the one who died. If the Void made a copy of me, I'd end up losing sleep over which one of us was the real one. Because if it can do that when you're dead, then surely it can do it while you're alive. And I believe we've seen this multiple times already. The rub is, who's who? Which is a copy and which is the real one? Maybe even puppeted when we see it take another form. Well, once the Drifter has improved his standing and earned Eleanor's trust, Rusalka's story, at least the one we are shown during the quest, is more thoroughly revealed as she discloses the truly shocking and downright terrifying information she was unable to speak about earlier, clearly due to what she was only piecing together at that very moment. She calls on the Drifter again and explains, remember how I told you about how I tried to touch Rusalka's mind with mine, and I made contact with the indifference instead? I wasn't ready to talk about it then, but I'm ready now, if you're willing. This creature, this presence, is what we're ultimately up against. I know that much now. I reached out for Rusalka, and it was as if my fingers touched her face and went right through. The mask just collapsed. I was trying to probe her, but she wasn't there. Hollowed out, but whatever was driving her wasn't like you. Anything human about it was just a mockery. It was about as human as a store mannequin, in pieces. The outer layers just caved in like wet, spongy plasterboard, and then I was immersed in it, floundering. What was underneath was like, there's a word, Kalencher, It's a kind of madness that used to affect sailors. They'd become convinced that the green sea all around them wasn't water at all, but green grass. They'd be compelled to jump from the ship down into the beautiful green meadows and go running across them. If a shipmate held them back, they'd fight. I jumped, expecting grass. Next second, I was in over my head in the freezing dark. There's a feeling there isn't a word for. You look out on the world and you just know that all the ordinariness, buildings, cars, people, jobs, work, routine, is just a thin crust over a bottomless horror. And if people ever realized it, they'd start screaming and never stop. I fell through the crust, but it wasn't emptiness. I could have borne that. It went on and on forever, but it wasn't just cold space. There was something in there with me, and it knew I was there. It was aware of me, like an elephant would be aware of a fly crawling across its eye. I remember thinking, nothing that big should know I exist. It felt such utter disregard for me, such monumental indifference, that I wanted to stop existing on the spot. I think I could have coped if it hated me. Then I would have had some value, some significance. But it saw me as meaningless. And I saw what it saw. I was a speck, a nothing.
On the day, my laboratory was mostly vacant of witnesses, most of all of expectation. Only my sluggish attendants, my sagacious Kavat, Kalimos, and of course my daughter. I had raised her alone, but with inconsistent vigor. In those eyes, her mother's, I did see a terrible reflection of a man that did not exist. A brave and principled man about to make history. In truth, he was a void himself, an outcast, a joke, a nothing.
Everything I'd ever been, every tender moment, every laugh, every morsel of Eleanor Nightingale blew away in that storm. It felt my light fading, and I swear, a tiny tremor of satisfaction went through it, as if it was pleased to have crushed me, a flea under its fingernail. And it's here I wonder if the name indifference didn't necessarily come from the fact that it didn't feel, but rather the feeling that people had of it when viewing it for the first time. This is really the first hands-on description of the presence itself we've ever been given. Up till now, most of it was largely speculatory, but this is a first-hand account, and to me is the best actual description we've received of what a person influenced by the void may be experiencing in the moment. Nothingness. And it makes me wonder if, well, do they ever come back at all? The way Eleanor describes this, even herself akening it to being hollowed out, maybe even more so than Warframes. Well, for individuals such as the Operator and Trotty, after his encounter with the Void, or perhaps even the Lotus, one would assume a level of resistance against complete takeover. In my estimation, the more palatable reason for their ability to keep their own free will, even after all they've experienced. The other being, well, that the Void just hasn't claimed them yet, but I'm forced to question this effect on a less Void-gifted host. A protoframe, for instance. Or in probably the most vulnerable iteration, a normal human being. While I very much hope this isn't the case, given my affinity for her character as a whole, I wonder if we'll ever actually get to meet the real Major Rusalka. Because if you think about it, unless the aforementioned dialogue we were shown at TennoCon 2024 is part of some future aspect of the quest, there is no iteration of Rusalka we've seen that's actually her. And given the association she is shown with Entradi's doppelganger, one may even assume this possession occurred a fairly long time ago. Maybe before the protoframes. Maybe even before the Techrot consumed the area. Does that make you feel uncomfortable? It speaks to the larger question as well. Within the Hex Web comic, we are shown the inner workings of a kind of understanding between her and Entradi. But is this between those two? Or are there others? And of all these people who have interacted with the Void, who remains themselves? The Holdfasts? The Red Veil's Paladino? How about Baroque-Katir? Do you worry you may be making bi-weekly deals with a curious man peddling wares from the Void that may not be who he claims anymore? And I guess, considering what the Lotus tells the operator during Lotus Eaters...
You, my child, the great indifference wants to take. I want to let it. I feel only the call.
Does even she remain the Lotus we originally knew before apostasy? The one who left with Ballas after removing her helmet? It makes me question the very real possibility that we will come to find at some point these individuals' actual bodies are somewhere. Suspended in a kind of void time lock, maybe. Similar even to what Ballas attempted and succeeded in trapping the operator during the New War. A kind of recursive time loop. Does that sound familiar? And where do you think he learned that little trick? If there's any validity to this idea, is it even possible they can yet be saved? Can one who has been overtaken by the indifference truly come back? Or are they all dead? No different from the parents of the Tenno, as well as the other occupants of the original Zariman 10-0. In this instance, everything we've been told from any one of these people, the Holdfasts, Paladino, even persons such as Lloyd or Parvos Granum, and of course, our own Lotus, any one of these people could have been a manipulation from the very beginning, perhaps even portraying the Tenno into largely living a kind of Truman Show scenario, watched and influenced to do whatever it wants, go where it needs. Trust in a world like this would be non-existent. And because we really don't know anything definitive, it's for this reason I feel Rusalka's parents are not anywhere close to prepared for what they're about to uncover. And it's this eventual pursuit of the indifference by this new group of protoframes, ones that do not have the experience of what recently happened, specifically with the indifference, that maybe concerns me the most. Greater beings in the grand scheme have not been able to overcome this entity. The operator and drifter have themselves only scratched the surface on what it even is, with no method or fleeting thought as to a definitive way to counter it, and two protoframes are going to somehow bring Rusalka back from wherever she is? Even within the aforementioned scene that appears to depict the Major regaining a modicum of herself, if you look closely, the minute the man on the wall appears, she is gone. And to me, in conjunction with the information I've presented already in this video, I believe this shows that she likely wasn't even there in the first place. This was almost certainly a copy, which makes sense if you think about it. A form it conjured from the void, one that can morph between entities it wants to portray at that moment, shown doing this very thing. But the point still remains. Where is Rusalka? And are we certain this is an answer we really even want? It could shed light on a great many other things that we aren't necessarily prepared for.
Do you hear it? The calls of angels, devils, life itself. It's grown so loud. It tries to follow in his footsteps through time. You must find him first.
Further, is this just another method of having other protoframes in Trotty's original plan to save existence become more playthings of the gods?
Look at these things lying around, abandoned.
The Void may not even need our help in acquiring the new genetic codes. They may offer them up freely, especially if Rusalka is considered a bargaining chip. After all, the man did come to deal. And finally, Eleanor's description of reality as she saw it while probing Rusalka. Is there more to that than we are acknowledging? This description of the world, in my opinion, falls in line with the theory I postulated earlier that 1999 is a conceptually embodied timeline, perhaps even made of void. And the way she speaks about the ordinariness of the world being a veil to the black sea of nothing under its crust. Is she just speaking about 1999, or is this how it is everywhere? And worse, has it always been that way? With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video and it got you thinking about poor Mommy Rusalka. What happened to her, where she is, and if she was just taken, no deal involved. We're learning more and more that the void entity needs very little interaction to make a copy. And clearly physical connection is not required. So if the heart of Deimos keeps beating void energy into the origin system and everything is powered by it, cannot everything it touches also be influenced by it? Maybe even from incredible distances. And if so, who can ever be fully trusted as themselves? I leave that question to all of you, Tenno. What do you think? At any rate, I hope you have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody.